And we're on. Okay. So welcome, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. I'm really excited to announce to you Borge Fagerli again. We haven't done any of these calls in a while, but this one is a special one because I just finished my first cycle of the SSD training program that we just released. It's Borge's masterpiece, and it encompasses many, many years of coaching and theoretical knowledge that he has accumulated. And I had the pleasure of being one of the first guinea pigs on this one. So in what we will do in this call is I'm going to share some of my experiences that I had doing this program, and I'm going to run them by Borge, and he can give their own 2 cents on the topic. So first of all, Borge, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. It's a Friday, weekend coming up.
Yeah.
So it's a nice day.
Yeah. To me, it's probably going to be the busiest day of the entire week, but it's going to make the weekend all the more sweet, hopefully.
Right.
So, so first question: are you training at the moment? Are you doing your rest phase, resensitization phase at the moment, or where are you in your own training?
I'm at the very end of the program cycle. I'm basically now at the point where I'm just extending it for a couple of weeks or so, depending on. I'm still gaining strength, so I'm gonna keep it up for a while. I have since I mentioned before, and also mentioned in the program, that my connective tissue tends to act up when I get into the heavier loading, but the heavier loading is also what provides the best gains for me and my individual physiology. So I just compensate for that by switching to an upper-lower split and spreading it out more. So I'm basically just doing every other day workouts and sometimes taking 2 days of rest in between, and that just keeps progress going for a while longer. So I generally just I feel great. So I'm just going to keep going for a while.
Yeah, perfect. That was unplanned, but that was actually going to be exactly my question. Actually, because I'm in the same boat as you are.
Yeah, like, I just read your mind, so.
Yeah, but I'm actually finishing the cycle this week. So by Sunday is going to be a rest day. So tomorrow is going to be my last training session, and I also extended the phase. So originally, this intended to run for 9 weeks. Is that correct?
Yeah, 9 weeks is sort of where most people end up by following the progression model, but as also mentioned in the program, you can extend the program both in the same rep range, meaning that if you're still managing to get like 5 to 6 reps, then you can just keep progressing from there. And I also have the option of extending the cycle, going into reps of 1, 2, and 3 reps, and having more of a strength-oriented focus. But for most people, I prefer just sticking to a pre-planned cycle for the first cycle, then adjusting the subsequent cycles based on your results and experiences with the first cycle.
Yeah. So off of that, so actually what happened, so as you said, in the program, you give a couple of options as to how to extend the cycle. Now, what happened in my case, for example, for chest, I started out doing bench presses, but then I switched over to this chest press machine, which served me really well and just fits my biomechanics really well. And have been using that and actually got to the luxurious position, which made me really happy, is that I maxed out on the machine by the end of the cycle. Yeah. I've been... Awesome. Yeah, ever since I started using this gym, this was one of my life goals, that one day I will max out on it, and it happened now.
Wow. Yeah, that's actually a very good point, because I see some people just kind of sticking to the squat, deadlift, bench triad, and just sort of ending up at the same place, the same loads. This happened to me many, many times. And I think one of the key points that I emphasize in the SSD system is starting to figure out your own body, your own response, instead of sticking to what some expert or authority is recommending. So a big part of the program is actually learning how to listen to your own intuition about stuff. I mean, I still have members asking me, okay, so what are you doing now in terms of nutrition? Well, I'm experimenting with this now. Oh, cool. Do you think I should do that? And I'm like, well, it's you shouldn't be copying what I'm doing. You should be experimenting for yourself. So if that's an experiment you're willing to do, or that feels intuitively logical to you, then for sure try it, monitor and see how it affects you. So with exercises, I think perhaps being more not only flexible, but entertaining the thought that there could be even a machine exercise that will be just a ticket for you to experience some pretty dramatic strength gains and hypertrophy gains. Because there's a lot of stuff involved in this. It's the psychological, mental side of things as well. If you have like previous experiences without exercise where you got injured, or you, for some reason, just feared that exercise or consider it scary or something, then you will have some subconscious limitations getting the most strength out of that exercise, which is often why practicing lifts on a daily basis with submaximal weights is often used in powerlifting, simply to, since strength is a skill, but it's also a matter of becoming comfortable doing that exercise and placing it on automatic. Then, unless you're competing in powerlifting and unless you're particularly built for or suited for those lifts, there could be other exercises that are not only as good, but in some instances way better. So, I've left the squat. I'm not doing the deadlift. I'm not doing the bench press anymore. I kept doing that for a long time. I'm improving my technique and sort of mastering that, but it's not moving upwards. So now I've switched myself to like a low incline bench press with a medium grip. And that's, it's increased by 10 kilos just this training cycle.
Wow.
And I'm doing my version of dips, which is like a forward leaning kind of thing with like this chest harness for climbing that places the load at chest level. So I can lean way forward. And now I'm like doing body weight plus like 35 kilos. And that's way beyond my bench press strength. So, it just keeps going up. So it's cracking that code. What exercise can you gain better on? And like you said, for you it's been that chest press machine where you can just comfortably now max out the stack and keep gaining.
Yeah, and actually, so one thing I did, which I may have done wrong, but at the end of the cycle, so what happened is I started clustering it. So at first I started doing reps of 5 with my 9 RM, and eventually I got to the point where I was doing sets of 5 with like 1 reps in reserve. And when I got to the point where I maxed out the stack with that, actually one time I added this ankle weight that I had to the stack, so then it was like 1 kilo more basically. But eventually what I did was I added like a rep or 2. So I ended up maxing out the stack at like 7 reps. So is that a viable way of doing it, or?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And of course there are various ways you can sort of extend the training cycle. Since you're more experienced, I'm going to trust that this is fine for you. For those listening and still in their first cycle, it's not something I would advise. I would just stick to the plan and just go into the rest resensitization phase, do another training cycle, and then start adding bells and whistles. But what you could do is stick with the same load, keep adding reps. You could keep adding sets, so like a volume progression.
This is music to the ears of the listeners, probably.
For sure, yeah. This, but this again, it's going to require you to spend more time in the gym, and it's not something I would recommend for all exercises. But on some exercises or muscle groups, so let's say for me, since I always want to focus on building my chest, it's been like a weak point for throughout my training career. I will both progress into heavier loads and lower reps, and I might add like 1 or 2 sets here and there. So we're not talking MRV kind of stuff where you basically go from 8 to 10 weekly sets to 20 or 24 weekly sets or that kind of thing, but generally just adding a set here and there and see if that leads to any strength gains, meaning that you're able to add more reps to each set at the same load, or that you're actually able to add load and maintain the rep counts. But at some point, since the effects of increasing volume isn't like acutely noticeable, It may take like a couple of weeks to manifest, and you will notice that not only does strength sort of start to stagnate, but you might get some aches and pains here and there, and just generally find it harder to recover.
Yeah.
So yeah, for sure, experiment with that, adding volume up to a certain point. I wouldn't go beyond, like if you're doing one myo-rep set, or of course at this point you're doing cluster sets.
Yeah.
I wouldn't go beyond like a 50% increase in volume for that training cycle before you go into the rest resensitization phase.
Yeah, and actually, in terms of volume, so if we are on the topic, I might as well get into that. Like, I learned some really invaluable lessons about my volume tolerance and sort of work capacity by doing this. So earlier on, I was kind of just guessing about how much would be appropriate, and I experimented based on some programs that you put together for me in the past. So I mentioned that around like on average 9 sets per week kind of protocol, which was like one where I made some really like some crazy good gains, like 5+ kilos of muscle in a year or like 10 months or something. So based on that, I experimented with some training protocols. But now, because of this autoregulatory nature of my reps and also the clusters, I really got a really good picture about my volume tolerance. And one thing that really surprised me is, for example, my chest and just heavy pushing has a lot higher kind of work capacity than my side delts, which was really shocking to me. And like one thing I wanted to experiment with is, so I was kind of baffled by how poor my work capacity was for my side delts with myo reps. And I was like, man, I probably need some more volume for my side and rear delts, because I built up some respectable delts over this past year, and I was kind of scared that I'm going to lose them. So, and I was kind of baffled that my myo rep sets always went something like 15, 3, 3, 2, or 3, 2. And I was like, okay, I'm going to try doing some straight sets of 15, because I'm curious like how it's going to go. And it went like 15, 6, 4. Right. I was like, okay, it makes sense that my myo reps went so poorly.
Yep. Yeah, there's always a correlation. And so here's actually a point that I addressed through a personal message this morning, where someone asked, well, but what if you just, do this sort of volume periodization where you just add some volume to increase your work capacity, and even, try to increase your work capacity during the myo-rep phase. And so while, of course, you could do that, provided that you're okay with doubling up your training time. And one of the premises of SSD training is to get the most bang for your buck. So if you're like doubling up your training volume in order to increase work capacity, are you actually sure that this will lead to more hypertrophy down the road? Because we don't really have any like concrete evidence showing that increasing work capacity does anything outside of increasing your strength endurance, because the body will adapt specifically to what you're asking it to do. So if you're asking it to tolerate more work, then it will build up adaptations for doing more work. And a bigger muscle isn't necessarily what the body will require to do more work with a given load. And so also the reason why we're doing this whole rest resensitization phase is to allow, we're detraining ourselves in order to allow lighter loads and lower volumes to do work. Because I would, before I started religiously implementing this rest phase, I would, increase my volume and do higher volumes, and not much would happen. It would start to drain my connective tissue health, and I would notice that impacting my recovery and motivation to train and all that stuff that most of us have probably experienced when we try to push volume. But for some of these muscle groups, after taking a proper, since I had been training consistently for like a couple of years, when I, sort of got back to the notion of actually enjoying a period of rest and seeing if that could change something. Then once I got back to the gym, I noticed that one set would make me sore as hell. And I actually started noticing growth from just doing one set and eventually one myo-rep set. Then, for me, that was like at least a degree of validation, even though I don't have any accurate ways to measure muscle growth, there was like a visual impact where even my girlfriend would comment that, hey, you did something different now, because I can see that, in this instance, my chest was starting to look different.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you want an increased work capacity just because you want to spend more time in the gym, or even, it could improve your recovery from more moderate volumes if you are adapted to higher volumes. But we don't really have any good evidence that it will down the road lead to more muscle growth than just going through the cycle of a proper training volume leading to a proper let's say an optimal rate of growth. I'm going to say optimal because even though you can achieve a higher rate of growth by doubling up or tripling or quadrupling your volume, I don't consider that a very good return on investment. So doing that optimal volume, achieving a certain growth rate, and then doing a rest resensitization phase and repeating the cycle and getting close to the exact same growth rate is, in my world, a better return of investment or a better way to spend my time and effort than just having to constantly increase my volume or even maintain a really high training volume just to, eventually the growth rate is gonna slow down to barely noticeable.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's sort of a different mindset. Like a few people asked me how many sets I did and how much volume did I do. And I think the cool thing about this is that the mindset is different. Like if you're serious about training, like I am, like I'm not in here to do the minimal amount of training to get minimal results. Like I'm serious, I want to get the best results. And for someone like me, with this kind of auto-regulated training, almost the mindset is like, I'm going to fight for volume. Because if I'm able to crank out more reps on a myo-rep set, then I get to do more sets. It just so happens that on some exercises, it's going to be a really low amount because my reps just drop crazy quickly. But I guess then that's the indication that's almost like my body's way of saying that this is how much I need for that given muscle group on that given exercise.
Yeah, exactly. And as with many other things in life, you can very often trust the feedback from your body on stuff. I mean, not always, obviously. And, I have people telling me, well, my body told me I needed chocolate cake today. And I'm like, well, that's probably not like your body's physiological feedback. That's something else interfering. So a big part of this process is learning to differentiate between the actual feedback that's observable in the gym and on your progress curves and how you actually adjust and adapt to things. Like a very applicable example is like the screenshot from the app that Alex posted in the system support group, SSD system support group, where he showed his readiness score increasing from like an average of 81.9 to 85 during the first weeks of starting the program. There's like a progress here of 3 weeks where it went from an average of 81.9 or 82, I think, and all the way up to 85, just by implementing the principles from the SSD system. And so that's visual data. That's like applicable data from it's from the Oura Ring app, where it measures your heart rate variability, your pulse, your resting heart rate, your body temperature, sleep quality, and there's like several people commenting below here, and where people have the same experience as well as enhanced sleep quality. So you are obviously doing something correctly if various biological parameters are increasing, and you can see your strength increase, and you're getting leaner, and you're getting bigger, and
yeah.
Versus just using, well, I feel like I should do this because that's what I've been told or heard,
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of a related question here is, we talked about this in the beginning, and I was expressing my, not concern, but like I just wasn't sure what to do because I was kind of stuck at a given rep range. So whereas the goal is to increase weight kind of more aggressively than you would typically do it, and decrease reps subsequently. And I was kind of just keep making progress and cranking out the same 15 reps in the beginning, but even by adding like 5% load. And what I ended up doing is kind of incrementing even more aggressively after some point. So one interesting thing that I found, and I'm not really sure how to go about this the next time that I do this, is that I found that there are sort of like two different 15 RMs for me. Like there is like an actual true 15 RM. So for example, on the bench press, I know that probably my 15 RM is something like, I don't know, 70, 75 kilos or something like that. But then there is the 15 RM, which I can do with like this great mind-muscle connection, slowing down the reps, just focusing on really kind of the squeeze and kind of all those bro-y stuff. And then I can still squeeze out a fair amount of myo-rep sets. And it burns like hell. It's still very challenging, but it's kind of a different type of effort. So, yeah, I don't know. Do you have any thoughts based on these nonsense that I just spewed out?
Well, there's still some lingering OCD-ishness going on here over analyzing stuff. But, you know, I keep reminding people that building muscle is a moving target. There's not like a perfect ratio of volume, frequency, and load that at any time point will, you know, become optimal. You're always trying to hit a moving target. So just do the best you can do and like approach this from a more bird's eye view kind of thing where over time, you are hitting that target or within that range where the target is a sufficient amount of times that you are slowly but surely building muscle. So the muscle is not gonna, you know the difference between 14 or 15 reps. We're not there. I mean, it's not that detailed. And if you slow down rep speed to increase the burn, then you're sort of sacrificing total amount of, you could probably achieve just the same time under tension or time under load, meaning that like let's say just a set of 15 where you're focusing on something else and you're just pumping out the reps. Yeah. Whereas if you slow down the reps and really feel the burn and you're sort of getting a higher metabolic effect and you can barely get 10 reps doing that, then you're probably going to be in the same ballpark when it comes to time under load, and you're sort of you might be sacrificing some time under load, but you might be making those reps more effective since you're achieving more metabolic stress and achieving some of those growth pathways that we're trying to reach doing high reps. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, there's always going to be, some days, and even as I talked about in the follow-up video that I'm going to make accessible to the SSD system users, it's in the VIP group, where you can see yourself enjoying and progressing more in certain rep ranges. Yeah, and this is all about your particular neurotransmitter profile and your individual physiology and even that moving target kind of thing. So being more aware of this is where I want people to end up, not being concerned whether, to achieve 15 reps, if I slow down my reps and focus more on the chest, I had to drop the load by 5 kilos or something. You're probably still in that very same ballpark range where you're stimulating muscle growth. You're still doing the job you need to be doing. So that sort of illusion about perfect is where most people get their panties twisted in a bunch and lose perspective of the whole training process that's supposed to be going on for months and years. And you never know. You will never know. And you have to accept not knowing, yeah. If that makes any sense. But it's so easy, and believe me, I've spent the better part of my life being obsessed about figuring out just that perfect kind of thing, until I realized that, or accepted that it's always going to be a moving target, and sometimes you hit it, sometimes you don't. And there's so much subjectivity involved in this, where we now have good studies showing that when people are allowed to choose their own rep ranges and choose their own exercises, they gain way more than when they're following a prescribed training program. Yeah. So there's this whole enjoyment variable involved that can often differentiate between gaining and not gaining. And it's not just about the volume frequency and loading. It's just having a framework of a sweet spot kind of volume frequency and load that we can be fairly certain, with a high degree of certainty, is right there where it needs to be. And the rest is going to be your becoming more intuitive about how your own body responds, not only to that workout, but to a sequence of workouts over time. And it's just building a point of reference. It's building experience. It's building intuition. It's building your sense of being more in tune with what's going on inside your body.
Yeah, and I think, okay, so I didn't prepare on saying this, so I hope that it will make some sense by the end of the sentence. But something that I've been talking about with Menno for something cool stuff that we are preparing for in SSD circles. We were talking about like how we don't, like maybe in a few years we are going to look back at how we quantify training, and we are going to laugh at like, yeah, back in 2018 we were talking about reps and sets, because maybe we will have a better tool at measuring, like what makes training effective. Like maybe we will be able to quantify impulse or of the training somehow, or maybe it is time under load. Like we don't, like sets and reps are kind of just a pretty rough, like rudimentary way of quantifying things, because we have no better tools. And it's almost like as if we didn't know protein or protein grams, and we didn't know how to count those, and so we would just use like quantities of meat. And like it's like, yeah, we recommend, in a research study we found that, I don't know, like roughly 5 ounces of meat per day produce the best gains. But it's like, well, what kind of meat? Some meat is more protein dense than other. So it's just pointless at this point to obsess so much about like exact reps and sets and all of that stuff, because we just don't know yet what produces the best gains. So
exactly. I mean, we can make educated guesses based on averages from research and literature, but at the end of the day, we have to start listening to or looking at our own experience. I mean, you say what you want about some of the pro bodybuilders, but I just remember back in the day when I used to watch these videos of Sean Ray and Leela Brad and all these guys, and even Dexter Jackson, and it's like, well, they don't even count their calories. They just know that a certain amount of food and combination of it brings about a certain condition. So they're very much in tune with their own bodies and watching how it changes. And if it doesn't change as expected, they change some tiny little variable, but keep the others constant, and then monitor and adjust accordingly. And again, this is like a central part of the whole SSD system. It's not about the routines. It's not about like, it's getting that whole framework in place, and then becoming more aware of how your body changes. And I can even remember many years ago when Brian was asked one of the eternal volume question, how much volume should I do? How many sets? And he's like, well, here are sort of the framework and the principles and the progressive loading and getting sort of in that range of time under load, so that there's a physiological stressor achieved within the muscle that makes it adapt. But a big part of it is actually sensing that strain type muscle growth promoting workout. Like he said, there's an actual physical sensation within the muscle. It's not about the burn, it's not about something hurting, but it's like a deeper type of strain kind of thing, where with experience you just know that this is a good workout, and that could happen after just one set, since with this moving target kind of thing, your physiology and recovery curve at that point in time allowed one set, or rather one set was just the correct amount of volume to make things happen. Whereas another workout sometime later in the training cycle, you could be at a point where it required 3 sets to get there. Yeah. And I also remember, like, he has sort of repeated this kind of thing throughout the years in various contexts, and I completely agree with him, and it was kind of interesting to hear Jeremy Lonicka saying the exact same thing in the podcast you did with him, where he's like, well, 1 to 3 sets is going to do most of it for most people most of the time, but for sure, you could do the job with 2 sets, but if those 2 sets didn't do it for you, then do another and perhaps a 4th set. But beyond that, there's like barely any major difference in the muscle growth you can achieve. Yeah. And so this is like a central tenet, getting away from all these numbers and being OCD about hitting that perfect, and then getting obsessed with what experts are throwing around based on a recent study, which is also just an average of everyone from non-responders to high responders for a certain training protocol. you need to be one of those data points that are beginning to get away from the static training program and getting more, aware of where is your individual target. Where how much should you be training and when should you be training to get where you want to be, and also, as a lot of research is showing, when it comes to elite performance, they are, or most of them are, enjoying the process.
Mm-hmm.
It's about the process and not the end goal. It's about the journey, not where you're going.
Yeah, and it's like there's a lot of way of that you can tweak all of this for yourself. Like I had weeks where, just to keep things interesting and fun for myself, I kept the same way of progressing. I kept the weight, and the way of progressing was the same, volume was the same, but I just played around with frequency a lot, even more so in the MyoRep phase. But I had weeks when I did upper body training like 6 days a week. I was just curious what's going to happen. What happened, if anybody is curious, is that my MyoRep performance just dropped in linear proportion to the amount by which I increased my frequency. So the volume I ended up with was exactly the same, pretty much. And yeah, so there's a lot of way that you can tweak things for yourself to make it more fun and interesting for yourself.
Exactly. And if that requires you to do some like drop sets or supersets or this weird ass exercise, then go for it. I mean, this is a template. It's not the holy grail.
Yeah.
It's pointing you in the right direction so that you can start to gain experience with the proper training process and getting the most bang for your buck, the most gains from the time and effort you're actually spending doing this. And quite the contrast for a lot of people that are just, working their asses off for many years and perfecting their protein intake and calories and still just basically ending up at the same point.
Yeah.
Or getting exhausted doing that. Yeah.
And okay, so just in case, a few more OCD type questions.
Go ahead.
So one thing that crystallized for myself, like even more. Okay, let me step back one. So one thing that we offer in this template is just changing up exercises depending on the phase you're in. So some exercises might be better suited for high reps, some exercises might be better for low reps. But one thing that I found is that, once again, is that my elbows are just so shitty and it just really doesn't tolerate a lot of stuff. And one thing, like basically bicep curls and just bicep work in general just doesn't feel good if I go much below like 20 reps. So do you think something I could try maybe for the next cycle when I try this is, instead of starting out at 20 reps, like I would do for chest, for example, I would start out with like 35 reps or something and ending up at for 20 sure. reps? Yeah.
Definitely. And so, I'm going to reveal some of the material from that VIP group video that I posted, like a 1-hour presentation on this. But if you look at your estimated 1RMs from the 15, 10, and 5 rep max testing, and if you're doing the same exercises, you can sort of see your individual strength curve. So if your estimated 1RM is higher for the 15 reps than for the 5 reps, then that's probably an exercise or muscle group that's more tuned towards doing higher reps and vice versa. So like for me, I will have, for most muscle groups, my estimated 1RM from the 5 rep max testing is way higher than the 15 rep max stuff. I still go through the 15 rep max or 15 rep phase and high rep phase simply because it's so good for my connective tissue and joints and recovery. But, I sort of hate it inside. And, because it's painful and it hurts and my body is obviously more suited for more explosive low rep type activities. But again, my connective tissue when I get to the low reps is always a limitation. So my adjustment is simply to spend more time like in the 5 to 10 rep range and extending my cycle further and sort of staying in that range and getting quickly through the high rep phase. But I've had some clients that are just, you can tell them to do a max reps at 80% of 1 rep max, a load that I can barely get, 5 reps with, maybe 3 or 4 or 5 reps in some exercises. And these, I'm going to say guys, but there's a lot of women here in that in that demographic, and they're like getting 15 to 20 reps with that load.
Yeah.
So for them, once we start focusing on higher reps, I have one particular client that kept doing. This was a guy actually, and he kept doing this 5 sets of 5 program, so that classical starting strength program, and he was gaining, but it was like a really slow type of progress. And as he did the high rep part of the cycle, he actually got to the point where he managed to get 15 reps with his previous 5 rep max, just in a few short weeks of doing high rep training. So that was obviously more conducive for his individual performance and gains, and he felt safer, and there's a lot of mental, psychological stuff involved here. But for him, that was like cracking the code for him, just spending more time doing higher reps, and then briefly doing low reps for a while to sort of build a higher end top strength and neural gains and all that stuff. And connective tissue health as well, obviously, since it does require some loading to improve your connective tissue health as well. But again, this is back to cracking the code, your individual code. Where do you see the most gains? What do you thrive on doing? And if that's higher reps for you, I would for sure recommend it.
Yeah, awesome. That's an awesome response. Another thing that I wouldn't say I want to try that. I'm just curious, like how that would work. And I was wondering about this earlier on, but I just went with the original protocol setup. But like if someone was to, like, the original kind of setup is going from like 15 reps to like 14, 13, all the way down to like 10, and then like switching over to like heavier loading and doing some clusters. And what if someone went from like 10 reps down to 9 reps, down to 8 reps, down to 7, and instead of clustering, just going into like straight sets that way and going down all the way to like pretty heavy weights?
Yeah, actually that can be a pretty good option for some people, especially those who tend to not get the best results from metabolic stress, metabolic work. Mm-hmm. So again, if you're the type of guy that when you do MyReps, you just suffer. Yeah. It's still good for you to do that MyRep phase, because there's some important mechanisms involved here that will benefit you later on. But when you get into the cluster phase and you just see that like performance drop tremendously, I tend to see that effect in myself. So I don't do a lot of cluster training personally. Mm-hmm. But that's through learning how that affects me. So I have done my fair share of both MyReps and cluster training to get to where I am now, where I understand my body better. So I still do some cluster training on muscle groups that tend to enjoy that or thrive on that and gain on that. But for the majority of my muscles or exercises, I just go into straight sets and just pair up stuff. Or, I will do like dips followed by face pulls, so I go back and forth between exercises. So I still get like 1 minute up to 2 minutes of rest between exercises. But when I get back to the, same exercise, 3 to 4 minutes have passed.
Yeah.
So that's certainly viable, but also keep in mind that there's a variation, a strategic variation in intensity of effort here. I vary my intensity of effort based on my recovery. So I do it like on a daily workout type of basis, where I can push myself harder for several workouts in a row, and then I have a day where I just don't have it in me. So I do more reps in reserve, and I allow my reps to drop at the same loads or whatever. But it's if you follow the recommendation on reps in reserve that's periodized in a pre-planned fashion, you're not going to see 10, 9, 8, 7 reps throughout the training cycle.
Yeah.
So just to sort of remind people of that.
Yeah, actually, that's one thing I'm looking forward to try the next time around, because when I started out, it was before the completion of the SSD system. So I kind of just started out with my reps with some standard, like pretty much almost to grinding failure all the time, or like 1 rep in reserve. So basically when I could still crank out that 15th rep or 12th rep or however many reps I was doing. So I'm curious to see how it's going to be the next time around when I'm going to periodize my IR as well. So
sure.
Yeah. So I'm curious, like, how do you, I'm basically asking you all of my questions on the training front, just to give people some perspective. I'm actually going to sort of test out how much I feel like I gained some muscle, but of course, like, I'm relatively advanced, so it's hard to really see the small amounts of gains you made. I was kind of playing around with some higher carb intake lately, and when we were hanging out here in Skopje, that was around the time when I started out. But that was actually my first training session there, here together, and I was, I believe, like 81 kilos at around 12% body fat, but I was at like pretty much zero carbs at the time. Now at higher carbs, I think I'm roughly the same body fat percentage. Today I stepped on scale at around 85.5 kilos or something. So I'm curious if I'm going to drop the carbs again, like how much heavier I will be, if I will be.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, but there's definitely some, there's the glycogen involved,
of course,
and fluids, so, but still you have most certainly built some muscle throughout this training cycle. I can guarantee it.
Yeah. I'm curious, just to close this whole thing off slowly, are you experimenting with some dietary stuff lately, or have you found that sort of, not magic bullet, but that stuff that tends to work for you for most of the time?
Yeah, I mean, I keep experimenting, and as always, again, just trying to feel stuff out and follow my intuition on stuff. And I've been all the way from super high protein, zero carb, to like moderate or even low protein and super high fats, like double the fat compared to protein in grams. And I've had periods with more and less carbs, and so for now, for a period of time, I'm trying out higher protein again, simply because I just love eating meat and proteins in general. I always have. I had some issues with that before, as I've discussed in the Q&As, where my blood sugar levels would drop to like hypo levels. I would like measure 2.8 in blood sugar after the overnight fast, where like the lower end of recommended blood sugar range is 4. So I was actually into coma range there. I would also get sort of moody and cranky with high protein, probably because it has it does affect dopamine levels and serotonin levels, dopamine most of all. And I have noticed now that I increase my protein intake, I also have started eating more like fruits and berries and some steamed carrots and stuff like that. So I have increased my carbs somewhat, I have increased my protein somewhat, and then also dropped my fats to accommodate. And I feel pretty good right now.
Oh,
I do.
Okay.
So my blood sugar is still within normal range, and I will. One of my theories is that I worked closely with Paleomedicina Hungary for a while, and Dr. Chapatoth there, and he advised me to follow this diet due to intestinal permeability, where you basically don't tolerate fiber or even carb foods very well. You don't, you have a lower tolerance for a lot of foods. And I used to have severe issues with certain foods before. And my first zero carb experiment with higher proteins and like probably not sufficient fats led to some success in that regard. So once I started reintroducing carbs for a while, I felt good, and then I didn't feel good. I got some very severe GI distress. This time around, things have improved a lot. So now I don't, of course, there's more bloating since you're adding more volume of food.
Yeah.
But I feel way better than I ever did before eating this way. And I do believe there are some intestinal permeability improvements simply from following a strict PKD diet for a prolonged period of time, almost 2 months. Yeah. And they have seen that they have measured, like through their PEG 400 test, that intestinal permeability improves after only 3 to 6 weeks on the PKD diet. So I have for sure done some good work there. I'm still waiting for the results of my test so I can confirm it. Their chemist actually died, so they had to get a new one. I don't think he died from the diet. I think there was some other stuff involved, a car accident or something. We shouldn't laugh at this stuff, but still. So that's why I'm waiting for my results. But yeah, it's sort of been experiencing, and it has been a good experience to see that I can again increase or just eat more meats and still have some fiber and carbs, but again, there's a sweet spot. There's still a sweet spot. If I go much beyond like the 80 to 120 gram range of carbs, I start getting sleepy and bloated and don't feel so well. So it's improving, but I'm still not into the eat 300 to 500 grams of carbs from rice territory.
Yeah.
Probably never will be.
Yeah, like for me, like this conundrum, one thing that I want to experiment with, I'm sort of reluctant to do it just because it feels like a stupid way of blowing calories, if you will, is like a carnivorous diet with some dextrose or maltodextrin to like try out that, like still being like on a glucose-based diet, but eliminating all the fiber. Yeah. It feels like a stupid way to eat, so I'm kind of reluctant to try it, but I'm curious what would happen, because like what I found is that mentally and energy level-wise, gym performance, all of that stuff, I really do thrive on a carb-based diet. Sure. It's just the gut stuff, the digestive stuff can get pretty horrendous at times. And so it's
I would recommend just doing rice instead. Don't use the powders. I mean, I agree, it's a waste of calories.
Yeah.
So just boil some rice and
it's basically the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's basically the same thing. I mean, rice is just glucose polymers. So it's a good way to get in starch with almost zero fiber.
Yeah, agreed.
I used to do that before when I had severe digestive issues. I would use only rice as a carb source, and that worked really well. Well, except for the increased water retention and fluctuating energy levels due to the carb intake I was at the point. But it's at least better than maltodextrin or dextrose. Yeah, agreed. Okay, awesome. So I think I went over everything that I wanted to cover here. Yeah, so but a brief summary of your results and experiences, if you would sum it up like in a couple of sentences of the SSD training cycle.
Yeah, so first of all, progress. I definitely feel like I gained some muscle. I definitely gained a fair amount of strength. I learned a lot about my body and how I respond to training. And in many ways, I was forced to step outside of my comfort zone because this is not the type of training that I was used to. But I think this period of self-experimentation really taught me like a lot of things in terms of what types of rep ranges my body responds well to in certain exercises and certain body parts. Also about my volume tolerance and what works for me best on that front. And I'm still serious about training and I still am pushing to make the best results, but I still sometimes have to come to terms with the fact that I'm not leaving the gym, everything aching and feeling like a truck just ran over me, but just actually feeling good and like pain-free and just energetic all the time. Exactly. And it's
the way it should be.
It's the way it should be. It's just something that like bodybuilding and just this whole fitness game can just mess up our heads at times, that it almost feels like it shouldn't be that way, and feeling kind of miserable is the right way to be. So
exactly, and that's why I built the system. It's to sort of show people how you can enjoy the process and still get gains. I mean, you can get better gains doing that. Yeah. And so it's a head twister for sure, but doing like 2 to 3 cycles of this, even if you never did this type of program again, it's going to teach you some lessons that you can use for the rest of your life, not only in the gym, but also in terms of food and just, again, learning your own body and trusting your instincts on stuff.
Yeah. And it's really, I think, once you find a system that is sort of auto-regulating things and is like using your body's feedback mechanisms to make the right decisions about what you should do in the gym, it sort of allows you to finally put your head in other places and focus on improving your life on the whole. And that's probably the biggest gain that I got from this, not even more so than the muscle gains, which I'm definitely happy about. But one thing that I'm really grateful for is that like I can actually use my headspace to work on other areas of my life and improve as a person on the whole, which sounds really corny, but it's really true.
No, it's perfectly formulated. I mean, this is at the end of the day, if you love going to the gym and that's your job and career and you can actually make money off of it and it's your huge passion, then, perhaps this isn't for you, except for getting some outside experience and perhaps becoming mind blown about, various stuff that you haven't tried before. But this is for people who want to enjoy life in a different way outside of the gym. Yeah. So it's sort of building that part of your life to a point where you can just trust the process and get on with it.
Yeah, exactly. So, Yeah, I think this training cycle really well encompasses the name sustainable self-development. So, so yeah, with that, I want to thank you for being on, and I want to thank you for creating the program.
Yeah, thank you for teaming up with me and enabling us to convey all this information and philosophy to people out there. It's been awesome. It's an awesome journey. It still is. Yeah, absolutely. So guys, anybody listening to this, if you have tried this training cycle or if you're running it currently, we are super excited to see how it's going to work out for you, and we are super confident that you're going to have awesome experiences with it. And if other one of you are on the fence about trying this out, then I would recommend that you check out our earlier episodes and videos on this. We have a couple of footages where we talk over the whole cycle, and we are going to put in some training footage as well. So yeah, there's a lot of free information out there. So
oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah, we're happy to share.
Yeah, exactly. So guys, thank you so much for being on, and with that, we will see you in a similar episode sometime in the near future.
Yeah, thanks. Have a great weekend.
Alright guys, I hope you enjoyed this episode and liked what you heard. And if you did, then I think you'd definitely love our SSD Training and Nutritional course that we recently put out with Borge Fagerli. This program not only contains a 12-week phasic training program that you can use to time efficiently and safely build the best body you can, but also gives you 4+ hours of video lectures about managing your nutrition and lifestyle to not only look good, but feel and perform optimally. And besides this, you will also be getting some really awesome bonuses like Borge Fagerli's MyoReps and Zero Carb ebook. So if this sounds interesting to you, then go ahead and check out sustainableselfdevelopment.com. And of course, to not miss out on future episodes like this, subscribe to the podcast and you'll be up to date on everything we'll be putting out. So thank you for hanging around up until now, and see you next time.